Hello friends, and welcome back to MSFS Flight Plans. It has been 14 very long days for me since our last upload, and man am I looking forward to getting back into my sim pit. I have been a very busy boy, all kinds of things going on, lots of new things. We're going to take a very cool flight. We're going to showcase some new stuff that I finally got after waiting a long time. So let's get right into it. This is going to be maybe a lunch break flight. It's about 30 miles in the air. We are going to be in another one of my former hometowns, the least favorite of all of them by a very large margin, Buffalo, New York. Not only that, but I do finally have my new computer. I've got my 5090 up and running and installed, got the sim up and running, working on the new computer, which I was really worried about. Working just fine, and we are taking the 170. Since I am about to start flying a lot more often in real life, I'm trying to stay in 170-ish, 150-ish style airplanes so that I can use my external Cessna style throttles. So I'm trying to get used to that, develop some better muscle memory. This one, of course, is a tail dragger, which is awesome, and it's old, which is pretty cool. So before we even hop in there, let me show you a couple of different things. I'm going to turn on my frame rate counter if I can in just a second. Let me see if I can just get it on right now. I don't know why it disappeared. There it is right there. And it'll probably start activating here in just a minute because I want you to see, I know you've probably seen plenty of people showcasing their 5090s on the internet, but I want to show you what's going on with mine. I haven't really tuned it up. It's supposed to have come from, it came from Digital Storm. That's where I bought it. Had to wait about 3 months. Obviously supplies are a bit tight, but it is supposed to be tuned, benchmarked from the store when they sent it to me. So everything seems to be working fantastic. We're still getting an NA for our FPS, but maybe once we start moving, that number will change. But let me show you what the graphics settings are I've got for this, just so you can see the kind of performance we're getting out of this thing. Let's see. Let's just go straight into settings here. Escape. Graphics. All right, so we have got this thing fully maxed out. I don't push this past 300 because it doesn't really make much of a visual difference. I was usually hovering around 200 probably with my, especially in a PG city, photogrammetry city like Buffalo is. But we're up to 300 right now because pushing it any further than that is unnecessary in my opinion. Everything else is set to Ultra. And I do have this set at the 2x frame rate multiplier for this. I do have DLSS. I can fly it just fine in TAA, but there's just a little bit of ghosting with this. At TAA, I'm going to get around 70 frames per second probably, so just divide this by 2 if you want to figure what it would be without the frame rate multiplier in there. The only artifact really is the tiniest bit of ghosting, but I don't have any glass in the cockpit, so you really don't notice that. It didn't faze me at all. I couldn't notice any differences. Object level of detail maxed out. Everything as high as it will go. The only thing I have turned off is the fauna, because we can't see any of that anyway. Everything else is set to Ultra. So other than the fact that I used to live out here in Buffalo, and we've never taken a flight out here, we've done all the other hometowns I've ever lived in, I was looking around at some of the recent updates for the Bijan Seasons Enhanced Pack, so that's the first of the add-ons that we have installed for this, and I noticed that there are several cities where he removed those angular photographic or photogrammetry trees in so many of these areas, and you guys know I just can't stand that. It is such an immersion breaker. So we shouldn't see a single one of these out here in Buffalo, which is, it makes a big difference. I mean, you don't think about it because you're not seeing them, but it's nice. It looks a lot more realistic. We also have all of the airport traffic turned on. I never, ever used to do that before. In any of our flights, I never had the airport traffic turned on. I don't have any other AI air traffic flying around, but you can see we got cars driving around back there in the background. I do have a Latin VFR add-on pack installed that puts actual livery on a lot of the planes. You can see some of those tails back there have actual livery on them. So that's the payware that I've got, the Bijan payware. I have a freeware add-on installed for this airport and a freeware add-on installed for the Bills Stadium because that area is just outside the photogrammetry zone. And if you fly out there and take a look at it, it's going to look totally flat. So real quick, let's just drag, let me get my pointer back, a little nav map over here so you can see where we're going real quick. Now, for some reason, when I reinstalled little nav map, I thought I had the most recent version on my former computer, but something has updated. You can change the color of the track here. I'm used to it being yellow. It will turn magenta as we fly along it, but it's going to be red, which I kind of like because it's a different change of pace. And for some reason, I had changed something on the last one. You see how hard it is to see the labels for all of my bookmarks here? I changed something before that put a background on it. See all these have a background on it so you can see a little bit better? I cannot figure out how to do that. I read through the manual. I clicked on literally everything I could find. I probably missed the one spot where you can click on something to get a background behind this lettering because as you can see, it is really hard to see that no matter how close you get unless there's something really light behind it. So here's going to be our flight. Look at all these boats out here. Yeah, that's what happens when you turn the ships up to full on Ultra. That's awesome. So that's Lake Erie down there. This flight plan, as always, will be included if you feel like you want to take this just like we are. And this is not a huge photogrammetry area. It's probably about like this part of the city. but it's good enough. It's going to cut off right about here. The Bills Stadium is right down here, and since the nearest airport is kind of a good ways from that, and it's a pretty short field, 2,600 feet, we're just a little shorter here on this grass field, which is really hard to find, so if you want to fly it just like this, I'll tell you how to find it once we get around there. And then the next airport's way down here. That's also a pretty short field, and I didn't want to fly all the way back to Buffalo Niagara International, which is where we're leaving from. So about 29 miles, probably be a pretty quick trip, but this is not a really, really fast plane. Let's go ahead and hop in and get her started up here. And with this airport, the GA parking is all the way down at the other end of this runway, so I just started here on the ramp. So we'll get in, fire it up, and just get right on the runway, which will be great. If it'll let me get in the plane. There we go. Okay, so let's see what all we need to do here. Let's get the mags turned on. This is probably not the right sequence. Get the master on. Go ahead and get our transponder set to altitude reporting mode. And man, I've got a lot going on, guys, with my study for my PPL. I'll tell you all about that stuff. Let's go ahead and give it a little prime there. And we'll just crack the throttle a little bit, and then we'll turn on our radio master, and we should be good to go. Okay, so let's pull the starter, which I believe is this one right here. Let me look. Yep, it is. Okay, so let's see if I can get this thing going. There we go. All right, so let's get our nav lights on, and landing lights can stay off for now. Parking brakes are already off, which is great because I'm still having that glitch. I don't know what's going on with that. I can't map anything to the parking brakes, so they just keep twitching around. Luckily, they work in the sim for most of the planes. I don't have this flight plan installed, so I'm not really sure if this will work with this plane, but I can pretty much VFR fly this pretty well. All right, so we're just going to kind of creep down to the end of the runway here because this baby will ground loop in just a heartbeat. And then once we get down here, I'll tell you about the airport, which there isn't too much to tell about it. Really easy turns, and man, you better go easy with the brakes. I don't know if we have flown this on this channel yet. Maybe one of my very first flights, which is no longer available for viewing because the narration was so bad, out in one of my other hometowns of Groton, Connecticut. I think we took this thing back then as well. But it's been a while. Quite a long time. There's all the cars driving by. Yeah, you can see a little bit of that ghosting there with that frame gen. I keep saying frame rate gen. The correct way to say that's probably frame gen. And we'll get turned around here very slowly and very gently. Or we'll be doing some donuts. Get a little bit of throttle. Come on. Come on, baby. You can see this is not photogrammetry out here. And we're not really that far outside of the city. But there's nothing really interesting to look at out here anyway. Yes, I'm intentionally going this slow. Now, the airport add-on I thought was nice. The runway markings look a lot crisper and better with that. I don't think it did anything to the terminals. Yeah, this is slow. If you could see what happened last time. You know, it doesn't look like... Those look like a couple of default liveries on some of those planes, unless that's like JetBlue. No, that's just the 777. Interesting. All right, let's give it a little bit of power here. Just get turned around. And we'll get my notes all set up on my left-hand screen, and then we'll rock and roll. I don't know why the FPS counter is not working. And if it's not going to work, I'll just turn it off. Well, I can tell you right now that it resides between 140 and 160. Even over the photogrammetry area. So since it's apparently not working now, naturally, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. There we go. And let me get my notes all set, and then we will be in the air. So this airport, when it opened in 1926, was known as Buffalo Municipal. And because it was opened in 1926, that puts it among the oldest airports in the country that are still operating. Aren't too many older than that are still running. This is not the live weather, by the way, being right here along the lakes. It gets very windy. This is a very light aircraft, which can be a bit cumbersome, especially when you're not on autopilot and you're trying to track your notes and everything at the same time. Rotate. I probably could have trimmed that nose up a little bit. So let's see. The last time I was flying over here, we had some Delta planes over there. Once I actually try to record, of course, the frame rate counter's not, and now it just keeps popping back up. That's fine. I'm just going to leave it up there. All right, yeah, well, we got some UPS planes over there. And it looks like they may have double stacked some. You can see some double tails on those. But the good news is, no stuttering whatsoever. So this area that's going to be just off to our right is called Williamsville, which is where I lived when I first moved out here, and I moved out here right at the end of 1999. This was my second position at my first job out of college. At the time, I was working for the DeWalt division of Black & Decker, in charge of the Home Depot channel for all of upstate New York. Home Depot is their biggest customer. Lived out here. Look at all that traffic driving around. I just never had the traffic turned on before. It's so nice to look down there and see cars scooting around everywhere. But I picked this spot because when I came out here to check out the area, and I came in January, like the worst part of the year for the worst town in the country. Sorry if you're from Buffalo, but I've lived a lot of places, and I can make a pretty good call that of all the places I've lived, Buffalo is definitely not in my top 3,000. I've lived in 3,000 places though. Okay, so let's just pull the throttle back a little bit, and I'm going to trim her up just a hair. And we'll try to cruise around 2,000. We're going to make a little turn here in a minute. We're going to follow this road right to the left. That's going to bring us around the university at Buffalo here in just a minute. That'll be your first landmark. But I picked Williamsville, which is off to our right now. There's nothing really to see down there, because it had this nice little historic district right in the center of town. Back in the day, there's an area called Glen Falls. They got some falls running through town there, and they had a lot of mills that they built out there. And they retained their little historic district, and when I first got up here, it was right after Christmas, and they still had all the Christmas lights out. It was just beautiful. So that's why I selected it. And to be honest with you, I'd lived in Connecticut up until I was 14, but I'd been in Florida ever since, so it had been a long time since I'd seen snow. There was snow on the ground, so initially I was pretty excited. We're going to have to keep trimming down here a little bit as we approach 2,000 feet. So it was pretty neat, but the mills and all that started going in the early 1800s, so there's been stuff going on out here for quite a while. And of course, I've always been a sucker for historic districts, historic anything really. We're moving a little slow, even though we're not climbing. And we'll just keep giving a little bit more power. Do I have the flaps up? Let's check that. Yep, I never put them out. And we'll keep trimming down some, just to get her just right. And there's the Niagara River up there. We're going to catch that and head over to Lake Erie. So the first discernible landmark will be the Buffalo campus of the State University of New York, one of several across the state. This one's called the University at Buffalo. But this is one of the two biggest out here. And between all the campuses, that school in its entirety enrolls nearly 32,000 students, making it the largest public school in the state of New York. We're going to see it coming around the corner of this pillar here in just a second. There's our parking lot. The largest private school, if you're curious, is NYU, with around 52,000 students. So there's their parking lot. And I can't, man, I mean, the seam, wherever it is, for the photogrammetry, going back to the default stuff, is so good. So look at this little building. It's kind of hard to tell. You can tell this is default stuff here. Look how good this golf course looks, though. I really can't tell where it shifts over. It looks like this campus is probably photogrammetry, but there's no significant color shifts or anything, so they blended that pretty doggone well. But it's just so nice, guys, to know that I don't ever have to worry about what kind of plane I'm going to fly, if we're going to be in a big city, if it's going to be photogrammetry. Wait till we get in the helicopters, because that was always a pretty big factor when picking spots before, because the performance was always questionable. I don't think that's default stuff. I think that's going to be photogrammetry down there. It looks pretty good, so we're getting into the zone here. All right, up next, this big green spot, which is going to be right over in this vicinity here by where that radio tower is going to be Delaware Park, which was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, considered to be the father of landscape architecture in the U.S., with Manhattan's Central Park being his first and most well-known project. It was him and another guy. I can't remember the other guy's last name, but I knew I recognized Olmsted when I saw it for this. And the Buffalo Zoo is, we'll see it better out of the side window, it's right up here on this end of the park. So this whole area right here, I lived on Colvin Avenue, was my second house, and it was probably right underneath us right now. Built in the 1930s, big steel worker area right down here. In fact, that's probably, I bet my house would probably be right about here. But it was really cool because even though it was, I guess what you'd consider low to moderate income housing, back in the 1930s, they didn't fool around with the trim in the houses. The mantles and the stair rails and the molding and everything was just beautiful. So here's the Buffalo Zoo here. I used to run from my house down around the zoo, down around Delaware Park. And this is called Delaware Park, by the way, because this is Delaware Avenue that runs through here, which used to be Mansion Row, back when there were mansions out here, but there aren't too many left, unfortunately. The zoo's not real big. They did have a bunch of bison in there, of course, because it is Buffalo. And on the other side of the park here, we're going to see the campus for Buff State, which is also part of the SUNY pedigree. And there's a bit more property associated with this one. Let's pull out here just a little bit. There's our athletic fields just in the corner of our screen. So the thing about Buffalo that I found, I'd lived in the South for a while, and in the part of the Florida that I'd lived in, everybody was new. There was a very, very small town before all the developers moved in and started building everything up. So here's their campus right here. That's Buff State. Their athletic field's down there. Where's their baseball field? That's obviously a softball field, it looks like. They got a football field, but no stadium around it. So that was the first thing that was problematic for me. I had a real hard time meeting anybody because everyone that was still here, I just think couldn't escape. So they'd have their same friends forever. We're not interested in meeting some guy that didn't talk as fast as they did up here, if you can believe that, coming from me. It was tough. I finally met a guy that was a rep for Pfizer, and we didn't buy, but we were renting that place back there on Colvin Avenue by the zoo. So this is the Niagara River here, and if you go about 11 miles to our right, you'd see the falls just on the other side of that island over there. But don't even think about flying up there unless you have your Jeppesen pack installed, because it looks terrible by default. Probably even worse than it did in 2020. And this little hunk of land we're about to fly over, this thing right here, used to be called Squaw Island, which was such a detestable name that sensible minds finally prevailed in 2015, giving it the far more pacifying name of Unity Island. An interesting little bit of history about that place. During the War of 1812, the Brits captured an American ship that was called the Adams before the war broke out, I think, and then sailed it out here to defend Lake Erie and named it the HMS Detroit. The Americans recaptured it down here by Fort Erie, this is the Canadian side over here, by the way. This is the U.S. over here. And after the Americans captured it, it got sucked into the current here and got beached down here on Squaw Island. But it was within range of the artillery of both sides, so they just shelled the crap out of the thing until the Americans finally made it out there and just burned it to the ground. And that's about all the interesting history there is for that. And this bridge right here is called the Peace Bridge. This is one of 2 international crossings before you get to the falls. If you head back this direction, you can see the big customs area down there. How high are we? Oh, geez, 4,000 feet. All right, let's just cut that throttle and come back down a little bit so we can get a close-up look at the city as we come around. And man, guys, I got to tell you, I mean, just even flying out here, I've got a little bit of PTSD from living out here. I've lived in a lot of places, struggled a little bit at many of them, especially being there and being new. This was rough. It was really, really rough. And I met a couple people that are from Buffalo that love it, and that's it. I get it. That's fine. But if you're not from there, trying to blend in there, not real great. Look how detailed all that is down there. Okay, let me just aviate for just a minute. I need to get some control of this because we're coming up on downtown. We're going to see a couple of ships they've got up here, and I did not realize this whole time I was living in Buffalo, probably because I was spending so much time just crying. They got a huge naval museum right here, down by the water. And they've got a guided missile cruiser called the Little Rock, and they've got a destroyer called the Sullivans, which is pretty famous, actually. And then they've got a World War II era submarine called the Croaker. This right here, by the way, this is the City Hall, which is one of the very few things I loved about Buffalo. I'm a big fan of Art Deco architecture. That was opened in 1931, same year as the Empire State Building, and it has that real Gothic kind of Gotham Art Deco style. I loved it. It's a great little part of the skyline down here. So we're going to descend a bit more and see how close we can get to these ships. I might even slip just a little bit. Let's do that. Let's see if we can come down some. The ships will be over left here. So as we come along the water here, look at all the old factories and silos and steel conveyors and all that. All right, again, we're going to try to get a better look here, but this is the Little Rock right here. Right over here is the World War II sub. It's right off the tip of the hull. It's really hard to see in the sim because it's small anyway. And that's called the Croaker. And the crazy thing about the Croaker is it used to be displayed in Groton, Connecticut, which is where I lived and was where I was born, and I've actually been on that. So I only missed 2 out of the 3 they've been out here. And even more fascinating is that my step-grandfather served on the Croaker, which is pretty wild during the Korean War. I think they launched it in 1943. Okay, so there's City Hall right there. The rest of the skyline is kind of ho-hum. They got some interesting buildings over there. Most of it's a lot newer than 1930s. And we got a couple different ballparks here. This is Salem Park right down here. This is the minor league park for the Blue Jays. They call them the Bisons. But during COVID, the Blue Jays were actually playing here, and they beefed it up. They put a bunch of money into it. Okay, there's the ships right there. You can barely see the Croaker right there. There's the Little Rock, and the Sullivans is kind of tucked over there behind it. But this was the Blue Jays' home field during COVID because they closed the Canadian border. And then here's where the Sabres play, the hockey team down here. I just want to get a good look at that ballpark. That's the biggest AAA ballpark in the country. They say it holds about 16,000 people. That looks beautiful. And where'd the cars go, man? On those flyovers, there's no cars. They're down on the surface roads. Okay, let's come back out here because I want to show you some of this coastline and these little canals they've got up here with these boats docked in them. Just gorgeous. And while we're turning, look at all those ships out there. Love it, love it, love it. Well, even though we're not seeing the frame rates, you can see that we're doing no damage to my GPUs at 54%, the cores at 46%. Yes. And my other computer sounded like someone was running a hairdryer next to my ear. This is virtually silent. Unbelievable. Okay, we're about at 3,000 now, so we'll give it a little bit of juice. Okay, so let's see. In urban areas, we're supposed to say if we're within 2,000 feet of the highest obstacle, 1,000 feet above it. So we'll try to do that over these windmills up here. Yes, every single thought is back to studying. We got our Mamu pack installed, so we got the marinas down there looking fantastic. You can see all the details of the cars and everything parked down here. And for some reason, my favorite area is right up here because they got some piles of dirt and stuff. This barge or whatever it is looks fantastic. And let's see if we can get down to about 2,000 feet, that is. As we come around here, which may not be within legal distance over the top of those windmills. And let's get rid of that pointer. Look at that. Look at the filth on top of the building over there. They do have a convention center out here. It's pretty small compared to most big cities. So nothing too spectacular. The jetty down there looks good. You can see all the rocks on the edge of it. Look at all this stuff over here. If we get too much lower, I'll strike the top of these windmills. But look at that. And they got some big warehouses and stuff over here. Just gorgeous. So right now we got a 6-knot crosswind, not too bad, which should wind up being a direct headwind when we come in. I wonder what those big things are sticking out there. Look at these. Maybe little lights to help the ships get in there at night. Look at that. Looks, you can see like the plastic, the visqueen they got over the top of their gravel there. Every little piece of crap sitting out there. Beautiful. Look at this. They got a mill of some kind there. Some conveyors. Love it. Initially, I thought that might be a rocket booster of some kind. I don't think it is. I think they're just more garbage they got covered up. More stuff they're hauling around. Let's look out the window. How do you like that? Super detailed. Fantastic. All right, this altitude's good, so we'll give it a little bit more power. And we're going to cross out of the photogrammetry zone pretty soon here as we turn towards the southeast. Look at that. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And just knowing that, yeah, there's nothing I'm sacrificing here. I got it all cranked all the way up. So while we have a few minutes as we make our way over to the Bills Stadium and then to our little grass strip, I'll fill you in on the history of Buffalo. And then I'll update you on what's going on with my PPL studies, which, at least for the ground school part, is rapidly coming to an end. Man, I could just drive over industrial areas forever. I don't know what it is about it. Seeing beat-up old tin roofs is like the greatest thing in the world to me. Just love it. Oh, and here we have a whole crop of them over here. Look at the trains down there. This is bliss. This is really bliss for me, guys. I sucked it up with that 3090 for a very long time, which in itself is a great card. We got more trains up here. But just not at the level where you can do whatever the heck you want and crank it all the way up like this. Oh, that is just gorgeous. I hope when I get to heaven, that's the first thing I see. A big train yard with a bunch of crap piled all over the place. This is a big mall they have out here, and one of my stores was a Home Depot, which I think was right down here. I don't know if it's still there or not. That was 25 years ago. And as I was coming around this, I was like, what is that, an obelisk or a monument of some kind? Because they got the big base around it. Looks like a park. It's not. When I zoomed way in on the map, it's like a cell phone tower or something, which seems odd that they would clear out so much space for something like that. All right, and here comes the Bills Stadium right over here. I'll get back to the history of Buffalo in just a second. They're building a new stadium. It's supposed to be done next year. You can't see any of it in the sim, but it's happening right here in this parking lot. On the newer satellite maps, you can see it. But again, if you don't put the freeware add-on that I have linked to this in there, that stadium will look completely flat. It looks pretty good once we fly over it. Around the rims, you can kind of still see the underlying flat stuff. And that must be right where the photogrammetry ends. It probably does. It probably ends right on the other side of this mall over here because that looks like it's photogrammetry. But Buffalo got its start as a trading outpost here on the far eastern edge of Lake Erie, really taking off when it became the terminus of the Erie Canal when that was completed in 1825. And that was a really big deal because that was the primary means of transport and the first means of transport between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic until steam trains hit the scene. But that thing actually stayed operational well into the 20th century. One of my favorite things to do when driving along the big interstate leaving Buffalo to the east, which they call the 90 out here, as you head out towards Syracuse and all that, Rochester, you can still see some old remnants of the Erie Canal, which I always thought was pretty neat. You can see the walls of it and stuff along the side of the road. But I read they closed that thing down in 1994, which I found shocking because most of it is just gone. So I don't know if they built interstates over it in the 6 years before I got here or what. I never did watch a Bills game while I was out here. I only spent 1 year in the zone, leaving of January of 2001. But that looks pretty good. Definitely a lot better than it did before, the stadium down there. But once the trains started running, Buffalo became the country's second largest railway hub after Chicago, which I also found pretty surprising. But I guess being right on the Great Lakes like that, there wasn't much else out here heading south. Back then anyway. But as all that canal traffic was declining, steel production started booming, and they also transported a lot of wheat out here. And the city continued to grow until it peaked in 1950. There's that stadium. But it has been steadily shrinking ever since then. Looks pretty good, huh? You can see right around the bottom here a little bit of what it would have looked like if that wasn't in there. I think these are part of the add-on too. They've got to be, because that would have been flat, so that's probably their training area over there. Also looks fantastic. And let me start getting down a little bit because we're going to have to start looking for our airport here in just a minute. So some interesting facts about the city. Its biggest impact on modern civilization, as you probably know, may very well be the introduction of the buffalo chicken wing. Those were first served at the Anchor Bar in 1964, which was still open when I lived out here in 2000. I went there and got some buffalo chicken wings. They weren't the best I've ever had. President William McKinley was shot while visiting the Pan Am Expo in Buffalo in 1901, dying from the wound just 8 days later. They didn't bury him out here, though. They sent him back to his home state of Ohio. But Millard Fillmore is from Buffalo, and he's buried out there in Delaware Park, just south of the zoo. Widely regarded as one of the most forgettable presidents in U.S. history, but I think good old Joe Biden may be giving him a run for that title. This was one of the first U.S. cities to get electric streetlights, thanks in no small part to the power plants they installed back there at Niagara Falls. The accomplishment earned Buffalo the early nickname City of Light. The first place, one website that was heralding the attributes of Buffalo, and I can understand why they tried to puff that up a little bit, said it was the first place in the country that had lights, but I don't think that's accurate. I cross-checked that. I think it was Wabash, Indiana, which also seems a bit strange. I've never even heard of that. And speaking of nicknames, another one for Buffalo is the Queen City, a nod to its place as the second largest in the state. And I bet you can probably guess which one is bigger. All right, we're at almost 4,000 feet here. We got to come way down. Too busy looking out the window. No problem. In another 2 miles, we're going to turn back towards the north, and then we'll be on our base leg. And just so we can come down a little faster, I'll go ahead and put in 1 notch of flaps. Okay, so I think I'm ready to take I've got my ground school endorsement from Sporties, which if you've been following along is how I've been doing my studying and practice tests for that. Consistently scoring in the 90s on the practice tests. So they say if you can do that, you're probably ready to go. But the deal with the FAA written exam is, so I understand, that whatever you get wrong, the section that you get wrong, they notify, or they put it on your page when they print it out, where they put your score on it. And you only need a 70 to pass. I could probably walk in there tomorrow morning and get a 70. I certainly hope I can at this point. But you have to go over with your instructor and possibly the DPE on your check ride, the areas that you miss. It doesn't say like the specific question, so it could be anything within that domain that you have to keep working on. So for the sake of everyone's time, I'm going to try really hard to get something better than a 70. But it's just crazy. I mean, I can remember, I guess a month and a half ago when I started doing this, just looking at all this information, all of these note cards, and the breadth of it is just so overwhelming. And once again, just being completely astonished at the capacity of the human brain. But I feel like it's like a hard drive. Like if I put too much stuff in it, I'm gonna have to dump something. So I'm trying real hard. That's why I haven't been doing these flights as much as it pains me not to be out here with you guys doing this, because I love it so much. But I feel like as I put things in, other things are falling out the other side. So I'm trying to be very cautious about that. I finally got most of the computations down. In the last 3 practice tests I took, there's only 60 questions on the real exams. On the practice tests, there's also 60 questions. The last 3 I took, not a single navigation or computational question. It's really going to wind up being a roll of the dice. If I'm going to get anything wrong, I think that's going to be the area where it is, because the answers are close enough that if you're not really, really precise with your measurements, you'll miss it. So I've just gone ahead and assumed I'm probably going to get some of those wrong. And they just don't have that many of those even on the practice tests. So I figure answer C, hope you get it right, and just see how it goes. I'd be really, really happy if I got above like an 85. That'd be great, and the 90s would be even better. And after that, I'll be ready to start heading up in the air. So I would say, depending on how quick I can get in there to take that test, within the next few weeks, I should be flying. And by the way, guys, if you guys do not have, or if you like flying the 172s, and I'm sure most of you do, who doesn't like flying a 172 or a 150 or a 140 or the 170 like this, or any of the 180s, 182, I got this 3D printed Cessna style throttle from Etsy. A guy named Gear Falcon made it. It was the priciest one out there, but it also had the best reviews. Some of the others, the people were saying they were a little bit cheap. This thing is amazing. Jeez, I'm about to stall. Okay, let's pick it up a little bit, Nick, here. That's not good. It's awesome. It's really awesome. Works just like the real thing. Unfortunately, it also has the carb heat slider on it, which I actually should have on right now. Oh, this doesn't even have a carb heat. Oh, there it is. All right, that's cabin heat. Let's say cabin or carb. Oh, I'm just going to pull it. I'm going to take the heat, because that's the most likely time to get icing. For all of you trying to harken back to your... If you fly all the time, you already know that. When you go to low power settings and you're descending, even all the way up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you can still get carburetor icing if you have a float-style carburetor, not fuel-injected, which is what these all are. But anyway, if you want to get that throttle quadrant, can't recommend it enough. It's awesome. Really, really cool. My carburetor heat lever is useless because you can't map it to anything in the sim, unfortunately. I swung out just a little bit wider here than our flight plan. We'll take a look at little nav map once I get down, because I was flying up so high. I wanted to come down some more. Ground looks pretty good. We got some printed trees down there. But did you notice there were no geometric trees? Awesome. So that's it, guys. I'm going in hopefully next week. I'll be taking the exam. And for all those of you that are just as moly as I am, I've got an appointment at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to get a nice chunk of my shoulder removed. Living here in Florida and being stupid enough in high school to hang out in the sun quite a bit without any sunscreen, this makes number 2 that I've had carved out. Okay, so let's think about where this road, or this airport's going to be. Really, really tough. You can't even see the strip. So we're going to come across this road right here, come around the side of this field, and then it's going to be this thing right here. You'll see a long grass opening, so just remember to come past this first road, which is the most obvious one here, circle around the other side of this dirt, and we're going to line up for that thing right there. I'm still flying really slow. Let's pick that up. All right, let's give it another notch of flaps as we do that. And this is the area which I mentioned in our last video where a lot of pilots wind up dying. Going too slow. If I would have tried to take a turn like that, I probably would have stalled, and being 1,000 feet off the ground, you ain't recovering. So in real life, I would not be looking at my notes and thinking about getting moles removed. I would be flying this airplane. Yeah, we got some default houses down there. I mean, from up here, those fields look pretty good. I haven't installed the map enhancement yet for this, because I think that was putting some gunk on my other computer. So unless we're just in an area that's like super, super bad, I'm just going to leave it out. And by super bad, I mean clouds printed on the landscape and things like that. And I can't remember if this is a payware plane or not. I love flying it because it's vintage and awesome. And as far as tail draggers go, as you saw, pretty easy to get up in the air, really easy to get down on the ground. Doesn't do a lot of hopping around, which is right up my alley for tail draggers. Last notch of flaps. We got the throttle at idle. We'll let that nose settle on back down, and then we'll bring on in here. I think we're going to have to give it some power as we come over these trees. Not a real long runway up there, but if you're coming in a little bit too hot, at the end there's a slope that'll slow you down real quick, and the brakes aren't real strong on this thing either. So we still do need at least one more recommended flight plan for our quarterly flight plan competition, because sim traffic in general has slowed down so much. Channel traffic has definitely slowed down a lot. If you guys have anything in mind, as soon as we get one that is flyable, we'll upload it. And then we'll close the competition. Vote as a sim community, and the winner will get a $75 gift card to the sim vendor of your choice, which is a whole lot of fun for all of us. I like finding new places, and I like giving you guys stuff to buy things in the sim. So again, if any of you guys are experts in Little Nav Map and you know how to get the background back behind that lettering, that would be a pretty big deal for me, because I don't like not being able to see all that stuff. I'm going to see how close I can get to the tops of these trees without getting down into stalling range. At about 70 knots, I think, is the approach speed for this, so we're looking pretty good there. And probably around 65 over the fence, or the trees in this case. And the flat part of that thing in front of us is right between those darker lines on each side there. And now my performance thing has disappeared again. That's really strange. And I'm not terribly concerned about it. Okay, we're slowing down some, so we'll give it some juice. We'll nose up just a bit. And bring her on in. Don't know where we're going next, but by the time we do it, I should be good to go with that FAA written exam. So I'll have a lot more time to start thinking about that, but I can't quit studying because I still have to get through the flying and the check ride. You see how there's just a little bit of a dip there in the middle? So we'll nose down. I've already got the power cut. Our speed's looking good. And we'll set her down. Flare it on out. A little bit of a hop there. But we made it safely. And pull her back. Get that tail down. Give it some brakes. And we'll shut her down. Love this plane. Love it so much. Alright, I'm just going to pull the mix back. Go and turn the mags off. And we'll take a peek at Little Nav Map here. Okay, let's blow it all the way up. Look, it's come back again. What is going on with that thing? Alright, that's that. And take the centering off so it doesn't keep shifting around on us here. So here's Williamsville, if you really care that much, but I was looking around for where my house was. It was right along Sheridan Drive, which is this right here. Literally right on it. My address was on Sheridan Drive. I think they have probably bulldozed it and put something else out here because it's all houses and stuff along here. And that was a big apartment complex. Maybe in this area, because it wasn't down here by the interstate. Okay, so then getting back over here, there's the university at Buffalo. Not a real big deal. Here is the Buffalo Zoo. Let's see if we can see the bison area that they had out here. I don't even know if they had polar bears out there before either. I think that's probably where the buffalo were, because I could see them as I was running by here. I could go like right up to the fence. Bighorn sheep. Wow, you know, I'll tell you what. I think this new Mapbox map that's in here, that is extremely detailed. That's pretty good for a Mapbox map. Usually they're pretty blurry this close compared to Google and Bing, but man, that is very, very detailed. Great. So here's Delaware Avenue. So here's Forest Lawn. And let's see if we can find Mr. Fillmore's grave. It's not marked in there anywhere, so I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I did go out there and see it while I was here. It's just been so long I don't remember. And this used to be where all the mansions were. And as you can see now, not many mansions. Mostly commercial stuff or multi-unit places. I looked up here too to see, but it's all the same kind of stuff. So you can see by these houses, this is where all the factory workers used to live. They were just cookie cutters of one another. And I lived right down here on Colvin Avenue, which is, let's see, from the zoo, I'd come over here, cut through here. Not Colton. Well, where was my house? Colvin Avenue, that's it right there. This is where I live. This is it, right there. So a quick story about what happened and why I left Buffalo. Every morning before I would go into the Home Depots, I would come out here and go into that little shed that was back behind our house and load up my truck, my DeWalt truck, and I would wear like a t-shirt or something like that because I'd be working in Home Depots, but it was in January, and there was a huge snowstorm going on, which was just as hellacious as you can imagine. So I went out there, loaded up my... That's it right there. This has got to be it. Yep, there's the little shed. So I go out here, load all the crap into my truck. I locked myself out of the house. No jacket, no nothing. It was like a blizzard. I didn't have a cell phone because I locked that in there, so I walked from here all the way to the Black & Decker service center so I could use their phone to call the guy that owned... There's a doctor's office below us. We leased our apartment from him. Call him to let me back in. So that's probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles walking in a blizzard in a t-shirt. My nose started bleeding because it was so cold, and it was one of those where it was just like pouring blood out of my mouth and everything. Snow plows going by, shoveling snow all over me. If you've ever seen a snow plow in Buffalo, you know they are serious snow plows. Got home, quit my job, moved back to Florida. That was it. Couldn't take anymore. So we cruised over here. Here's where Buff State is, right down here. And I could have sworn they had a stadium down there. They obviously have an athletic field. But there's a little tiny stadium. That's not much. And that looks like a softball field. Maybe they don't even have a baseball team. Here's Squaw Island, where the HMS Detroit got wrecked. And here's Fort Erie. It's right down here, Old Fort Erie. So this was run by the Canadians back during the War of 1812. And because I don't think there's photogrammetry over there, I bet we probably couldn't see that. But I didn't fly over there to check it out. But it looks like they've maintained that pretty well, doesn't it? And then we came down here and we'll get a much better look of the big ships they've got down here. So there's the Little Rock, which looks awesome. I can't believe I missed that. Look at that. They even got some planes out here and everything. Man, there's the Croaker. I've been on that bad boy. I don't know how guys survived on those things. Talk about cramped quarters. Ugh. And there's the Sullivans right there. And here's the ballparks. So there's Salem Field, former home of the Blue Jays for a little while during COVID, and current home of the Bisons. I did go to a game there, actually. We got a box for some entertainment we were doing for some of the Home Depot managers. Key Bank Center, that's where the Sabres play. And then here's that nice little area that had those. Nope, that's not it. Here it is down here. Yeah, that's definitely not a rocket booster. But look, they do have the barge tied up down there. I think this is my favorite area. Look at that junk. It's everywhere. Beautiful. Absolutely love it. Look at that crap. It's all over the place. Man, they got the solar farms right. Thank you, Mamu. That looked fantastic. And then let's see if we can see where they're building the new... Nope, you can't see it. On the Google map, you can see it. Right here is where they're building the new stadium. Right next to the other one. Well, that looked pretty much spot on, didn't it? With the training area and everything. Looked really good. So that's it, guys. That's Buffalo. As far as photogrammetry cities go, even though the area of it wasn't that big, I think it looked fantastic. Especially, thank you, Bijan, for removing all of those geometric trees. Really made a big difference, in my opinion. And just in case you're curious of how to get to Niagara Falls from here, if you don't want to take off from this airport, which is right next to it, just go north once you get to the river, and you'll see it's right up here. There they are. And you know, I haven't even checked this out in 2024 with the Jeppesen pack installed. I saw that someone else had just introduced another one, which looked like it got so-so reviews. The Jeppesen one is awesome, but I haven't tried it in 2024 yet. So if you haven't, it looks awesome. Let me know. That's it, guys. Next time I talk to you, hopefully I will have a passing grade on my FAA knowledge test. Can't wait to tell you all about it, and I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.